Hello. Shalom Aleichem. This is ZalmanMosheSapo. We're going to go for a run and a running commentary with Zadie. That's what we're going to do now. We're going to do it together again. And he's got a little hand and he says, "Hi everybody," with his cute little hand, right? Let's go for it. Shalom Aleichem. Hi, Malevsky here with grandson ZalmanMosheSapo. And this week is Parshas Mishpatim, but I'm going to go back to last week's Parshas Yisro. I learned something beautiful, but life got in the way and the kinus got in the way, and let's dive in. Parshas Yisro. In last week's Torah portion, Parshas Yisro, we experienced the revelation at Mount Sinai. We experienced God coming down and presenting himself to the Jewish people, 3 million strong, and telling them, "I am God, your God," and the rest of the 10 Commandments. So, what happened right afterwards? Right after the 10 Commandments were presented to the Jewish people, the very next instruction words were as follows: Atem ri'item, you saw, ki min hashamayim dibarti imachem, that from the heavens I spoke to you. God is telling the Jewish people, you saw everything, and therefore, and he moves on, he says, Lo ta'asun iti, do not make with me, elokei kesef, elokei zahav, gods of silver and gods of gold, lo ta'asun lachem, do not make for yourselves. So, God seemingly telling them, don't make idols. Now, there's some beautiful, extraordinarily beautiful Hasidic interpretation about this from the Alter Rebbe that the Rebbe brings down in a talk that I'm going to repeat now from Yud Shvat, Tafshin Chafal, 1961. I think that's the date. And the Rebbe, in published talks about this at further length and quotes the biblical commentaries that talk about this verse. And actually the verse right after that, it says, Mizbeach Adama Taseli, make for me an earthenware, an earthen altar. So the biblical commentator of the Ramban, Rabbi Moshe ben Nachmanides, talks about this, where God says, Lo ta'asun iti, do not make with me, elokei kesef, elokei zahav, gods of gold and silver, or silver and gold. And he says, what's going on here? He said, God Almighty is instructing the Jewish people to not combine God with other gods. It's called shituf. Do not bring in another deity and serve another god alongside with me. Lo ta'asun iti. Do not make with me another god. Elokei kesef, elokei zahav, gods of gold and gods of silver. And so that's what the Ramban says, Nachmanides. And so, technically speaking, it's talking about the prohibition for a Jew of shituf. Shituf means partnership or association. Partnership means we say, yes, I believe in God, but I also have some other powers that I want to invite. I want to join with God to help me out. That's called shituf, partnership. And the Ramban seems to say here that the Jewish people are a purely monotheistic nation, and our belief is a monotheistic one, and we can't have anybody else or any other deity, any other entity joining in partnership with our belief in God and our quest from God. Shalom Aleichem, what an honor. And repented. It's a running commentary you're going to get soon. Live. This is a running commentary. This is one of
you want to talk?
It's a running commentary. I'm in the middle of a Dvar Torah, but I'm very happy to see you.
Okay.
And you're going to get it soon.
Super busy.
God bless you. See you later. Okay. That was a blast from the past. A blessing. One of our dear friends and supporters. Thank you for being there. So, God says, Lo tasuniti. Do not make with me, says the Ramban. This is monotheism. This is the mitzvah, the biblical requirement to believe only in one God and not involving another deity. The Abarbanel, another biblical commentator, says, I've got a problem with that. And he says that the Jewish people are just coming down from the mountain, just coming from the Ten Commandments, literally moments before, where God said, Anochi Hashem Elokecha, I am God your God. Seriously? You think right now they need another instruction that they shouldn't have another partner with God? They shouldn't they shouldn't experience shituf, they shouldn't involve themselves in partnership with another deity. So he says that over here, what Moshe is telling the Jewish people through God's instruction, Lo sasuniti, is don't make an intermediary between me and you, says God. I spoke with you, me personally. I spoke with you directly without any intermediary. So therefore you don't need another intermediary. And he says that the people of the past in those days, they were accustomed to bringing in, like in the beginning of the idol worship, the whole idol worship environment started with the belief that there is one God, that there is a God that creates everything, heavens and earth. But then that God invested powers in the heavenly bodies, in the sun, the moon, the stars, and the wind, the water, etc. And the people started associating authorization or authority to these heavenly bodies and praying to them and saying, you guys are God's assistants. Can you please help me get to God faster? So they were being used not as something that is separate from God completely, but more like a servant, like an officer in God's army, in God's government, in which they're requesting the help. So the Abarbanel says that here too, right after the experience of Mount Sinai, where God said the Ten Commandments, including Anochi Hashem Elokecha, I am God your God, God is telling them, Lo tasuniti, you don't need an emtsai, is the word. You don't need an intermediary. You can come directly to me when you need something. Pray to me, and nothing in between. So it's not like, don't partner me with another God, like the Ramban says, but it's, even to get to me, go direct. You have a direct call. Like the joke about one of the presidents. I think about, talking to God, he picks up the phone in Israel, and the president says, for me, it's a local call. Okay, so that's the biblical commentary on this idea. Moving on, the Rebbe, the Lubavitcher Rebbe talks about this, brings down these two opinions and others, and he says this too seems too much. It seems like right after this godly experience where Moshe himself says the words, Atem ri'item ki min hashamayim dibarti machem. You saw, the Jewish people there, 3 million strong, saw that God spoke with them from the heavens directly without an intermediary. Why would they need this instruction, this further warning of don't... Shalom Yehudi, now that you're on the way. Why would you need this further instruction of don't talk to me through an intermediary when it just happened now that you spoke with me directly? So the Rebbe says that aside from these commentators, which of course all of them are true, but the Rebbe's revealing a depth over here that, from the mystical perspective, I'm going to go Kabbalistic now. And he says as follows. He says the Jewish people just experienced the kissing of heaven and earth, where God revealed himself to the Jewish people for the first time, or to the world, first time ever in that way, in that manner. And therefore, the very first discussion afterwards, the very first talk after that, the instruction, is going to be relevant to the purpose of that revelation. It will be relevant to the purpose of that revelation. So what was that revelation all about first? And then we'll see how the very first instructions afterwards are completely relevant to this and related. So the Rebbe says that what happened at Mount Sinai, and what was the purpose for the revelation at Mount Sinai? It was a twofold experience. Number one was there was a message that God was telling the Jewish people the Ten Commandments, and he gave it to them. That was the message. Number two, the process of the message demonstrated another purpose. What happened at the Mount Sinai Experience? It says that Vayar'am Vayanu'u Vayamdu Merachok. The people saw and they were moved and they were shooken to the core, and they stood from afar, from a distance. They went really, really far away. They couldn't handle the revelation from above. The Midrash talks about this is the experience, and says that at Mount Sinai, the whole world silenced, literally. The birds didn't chirp like you hear right here in Central Park. The frogs didn't croak. The water stopped churning. The wind stopped blowing. The clouds stopped moving. The Midrash describes in graphic detail how the whole world stood still at the Mount Sinai Experience, including the Jewish people whose hearts stopped literally from beating and who died and needed to be revived. So what just happened here, says the Rebbe, was the purpose of Mount Sinai Experience, aside from the messages of the Ten Commandments, was actually this element, this nature, this characteristic, this experience and message of Bittul. Now the word Bittul is a hard word to translate, even though we mention it many times here, because it doesn't have an English translation, and possibly because the idea doesn't exist in American or other languages or nationalities, in my perspective, in their consciousness. So the word Bittul literally means something like canceling out, non-self, the absence of self. So we generally translate as self-nullification, or self-effacement, or selflessness. So for lack of a better term, I'm going to try to use the words selflessness, the lack of self. So the Rebbe says that at Mount Sinai, the experience was an experience where God created Bittul. The revelation from above was so overwhelming that the whole world can't naturally cancel itself out. It was canceled out. There was nothing but God. The revelation was that Ein Od Milvado. There is nothing besides for God. There is nothing. Everything that exists is within God, is part of God, and within God. And everything that seems like it exists, it's within the framework of God. God didn't just create things and let them go many years ago, but he continuously creates them and keeps them going at this moment. And the Rebbe says this is the message of the Mount Sinai Experience, for us to know that Ein Od Milvado, there's nothing but God. Now the Rebbe takes this and says, in the biblical words, Lo Tasun Iti, God said that, Lo Tasun Iti, don't make Iti with me. There's nothing, even with me, there's nothing. There's just me. Lo Tasun iti. Don't make believe there's anything else. There is just God alone. This, of course, is supposed to affect the way we serve God, as we'll get to momentarily. And here's where we get to the Hasidic and mystical, beautiful interpretation. The Rebbe brought down a quote from the Alter Rebbe, from the first Chabad Rebbe Sinai Zalman of Liadi. Right, his Zalman. I'm running here with my grandson Zalman. He bears the name of Rabbi Sinai Zalman of Liadi. I'll say a little quick hello. Oh, down. There we are. Zalman is saying hello to everybody with that cute little hand. Now he's biting its nails. Okay, so let's move on. So the Alter Rebbe takes the first words that Hashem says to the Jewish people after the Mount Sinai experience, and explains them in a Hasidic way. And he says, God said to the Jewish people, the first commandment was, Lo tasun iti, do not make with me, Elokei Kesef Elokei Zav, other gods of gold and silver. And he explains. And he says, first of all, and then the second verse is a positive commandment. First is a negative commandment, do not make with me any other gods. The second verse, it's in chapter 20, verses 19, 20, and 21. The second verse is, Mizbech Adama Ta'asali, make for me an earthenware, an altar of earth. V'zavachta aleha, you should sacrifice on it, Olosecha ve'eshlomecha, your burnt offerings and your peace offerings. Basically, your sacrifices should be brought on this altar of earth. So the Alter Rebbe said, now there's two instructions. There's a negative instruction and a positive instruction. Is the beginning of the communication after the Mount Sinai experience. And he explains mystically and biologically, realistically, chemically, physically, Heder kodem lehavaya, or leyesh, that non-existence precedes existence. First there's nothing, and then there's something. And that's the way this world was. First there was nothing, there was only God, and then God created the universe. And then he goes on and says, Rikavon kodem litzmicha, decay precedes growth. When it talks about the seeds growing, the planting of seeds, first there's the decay of the seed, then there's the growth of the seed, of the planting, of whatever is being planted. So that's why the Alter Rebbe says God shows the order of his communication to the Jewish people right after Mount Sinai to let us know, first we got to be Bittul. First there has to be nothingness, Bittul, and then there can be something. There can be planting, there can be growth, there can be existence. First we have to nullify ourselves, cancel ourselves, be selfless to God's desires, and only then afterwards can we actually assume a true identity that's related to God. And the Rebbe takes this a little further, and he continues to explain the Alter Rebbe's words. And he says that the foundation that we just spoke about is a foundation that God is telling the Jewish people that this is what the whole Mount Sinai experience was about. It's about Bittul, about not sacrifice. It's not really sacrificing ourselves for God, but it's not being there, completely not being there. And the Rebbe talks about this, and he says that the second verse from the Alter Rebbe explains, I'm sorry, I'm going to go back. The Alter Rebbe himself says this, and then we'll say what the Rebbe says about it. The Alter Rebbe says, V'zavacht mizbeach adama tasali, make for me an earthen altar. So an altar itself is a place of sacrifice, and earth, why an earthen altar? Why not gold, silver, or other metals? He says earth is the lowest element that we have in the physical world. It is a symbol of humility. So he says, Mizbeach Adama Tasli. First of all, your sacrificial altar should be made out of humility, out of earth. And then V'zavachta alav et olotecha v'shlamecha. And you should sacrifice, offer upon this earthen altar your olot and shlamim. Olot and shlamim, technically, biblically, are two kinds of offerings, sacrifices. A burnt offering and a peace offering. But if you make a little play on the words, olotecha comes from the word elevations, comes from the words accomplishments, your aliyot. He says you should sacrifice your aliyot, your accomplishments, your advantages, your greatness. That shlomecha. Shlomecha comes from the word shalom, shalem, which means completeness. Your completeness, your perfection, your greatness should be sacrificed on this altar of humility, altar of earth. That's the Alter Rebbe's explanation, the Hasidic explanation of these two verses. And the Rebbe takes it one step deeper, or many steps deeper, and says within Bittul there are many different levels, but there's two general categories. There's a Bittul, there's a selflessness that comes from within, one that one works upon really hard. It says, I will dedicate myself to my master, to God. And that is great. But that's still related to the human being's experience. There's me, there's God, and there's me who sacrifices myself to my master, and that is God. That's a very good level for any of us. But the Rebbe says that's not the level that they experience at Mount Sinai, and it's not the level that is requested of us. What is requested of us is that there is no me, there is no my, there is just God. Not just ein od milvado, there is no one but God. But if you put God into the picture, then I too exist. But ein od, there is nothing else. There is just God. And that's what the Rebbe says, that experience at Matan Torah, at Mount Sinai, when God's incredible light overwhelmed the universe, completely overwhelmed the universe, until they ceased to exist at all. Therefore, says the Rebbe, that was a paradigm of experience that we're supposed to try to emulate and get to, that it doesn't matter for me that I am the one that's doing God's will. It's not about me at all. What matters only is that God's will is being done, whether or not I'm in the picture. Talking about in the picture, I think that's pretty much it. Let's see if this little boy is still awake. And I think he is. We're learning Torah with ZalmanMosheSapo. A little bit of sun in his eyes. He doesn't like the sun in his eyes. Let's just see what happens when we turn the sun up. Can you see yourself in the sun? Oh, you look so much prettier in the sun. Okay, anyway, I just want to say hello to everybody and goodbye. So Moshe, where's your hand? Say hi to everybody with your hand. He's been waving this to quite a few people. Want to wave your hand? Want to wave your hand to that? He's getting tired. Getting tired? Beep, 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 beep. With my finger? Okay. Goodbye, everybody. Say bye. Say bye. Bye. Thanks for joining. Thanks for listening. Cheers.